I'm joined by Benji Kim, and so honored to be here. And we've cultivated a little bit of a friendship over the last year or so.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'd love for you to tell everybody just a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your history with surf fishing here, how you got into it, and we'll kick it off there.
Yeah, when it came to fishing, I used to, like probably most of us, fish as kids. And my backyard, I live 2 miles from Irvine Regional Park, and so that's where I learned how to fish. I have 2 cousins, Andy and Richard, and it was the 3 troublemakers. And when we were probably like 6 or 7 years old, we'd get dropped off at Irvine Regional Park, and they'd leave us there, probably literally when we were like 6 or 7. And we'd have bluegill catching contests and probably just tying shoe knots. And you know, I know for sure at one point I was holding my spinning reel upside down. You know, my dad didn't fish, no one taught me how to fish. And that was like the initial entryway into fishing for me, and it's something that I enjoyed, fishing the Sierras for trout. We used to go camping up in Bishop every year, but I never surf fished as a kid, and by the time I got into my 20s, I had stopped fishing for whatever reason, I was big into baseball and basketball and trying to get married and whatnot, and so it wasn't until my early 30s when I was really in the dark night of the soul. I actually got a master's degree in theology, and I grew up very, very religious. My dad was a pastor, and I actually was a pastor for like 10 years in my mid-20s all the way into my mid-30s. And around that time, there was a lot of stuff happening vocationally that really put me in the dark night of the soul. I was in a kind of a dark place. Just mentally, spiritually, just life was very, very challenging at that time. And it was in that dark night of the soul where I remembered fishing. And looking back, I'm 47 now, so it was probably like 10 years ago or so. Looking back, I think my soul was yearning for that as a safe place. And so to this day, I fish with I have such a passion to make sure that fishing remains a safe place. That when I'm out on the water, that it's for the right reasons. And so when I came back to fishing, I was kind of a green bass fisherman at the time, and I like to fish Irvine Lake, which in my opinion at the time was probably the best fishery in Orange County. And it was that time when Irvine Lake got shut down. And so I started freaking out a little bit, like, what do I do? Where do I fish? You know, we'd go out to Diamond Valley here and there and stuff like that. And that's when I was reminded of my uncle when I first started fishing. I remember we'd go camping by the ocean every year, and every year he'd bring out his coffee grinder and he'd pin on sand crabs and he'd catch perch. And I never did it, I just remember him doing it. And I was like, oh my goodness, the surf, like it's literally everywhere. For me, I walked into Big Fish Bait and Tackle in Seal Beach, not knowing a single thing about saltwater fishing, pretty much, and picked up Bill Varney's book, The Light Line Surf Revolution. I saw it sitting there, and I'm like, dude, you can fish the surf with light line? That tripped me out. Like, I was not really drawn to the long rodding or, the bait and weight, like putting it up and just sitting on your lawn chair. I like to move, and so the fact that there's like this finesse style of fishing that you could do from the surf, that really captured my imagination, and away we went. And so I was just super passionate about it, starting from absolute scratch, not knowing a single thing, devouring Bill's book, and then just walking the sand, failing, screwing things up, ruining reels, catching fish here and there. But I would say that it was the most passionate I've ever been about fishing, any kind of fishing. I just really wanted to learn. It started with perch and yellowfin croaker and corbina. And so I gotta give a quick shout out. I know we're already leading, so I'm rambling, but I gotta give a shout out so in those formative years when I was just learning the game, I'm super honored. One of my surf fishing mentors is here, and it's Randy Toji, and he's sitting right there. And he's one of the OGs, one of the absolute legends of the Southern California surf. Truly, one of the most humble fishermen that I've ever met to this moment. He's become a friend, and just learning to pick his brain And just the fact that he's sitting here is like such an honor, man. So big shout out to Randy for really helping me get started. But yeah, that was just the beginning, and I think it's been like 10 years or so now, and so something like that. I lose track of time.
So you mentioned something interesting, and that kind of sparked my train of thought here. And you said, it's not something, surf fishing especially, wasn't something that you got into right away, right? It was always in the back of your mind. You always thought about it. But it just goes to show fishing in general, it's one of those sports, one of those hobbies, one of those passions where it doesn't matter if you're getting into it at 5 years old, fishing for trout, or in the surf, or off a sport boat for the first time, or if you're 50, 60 years old experiencing it for the first time. It's not like other sports where if you want to join the NBA when you're upwards of 30, I don't think your odds are that good. I'm not a sports person, but you can imagine, right? So walk me through what it was like, kind of shifting gears in the trajectory of your life and saying, this is going to be what my focus is on going forward.
Yeah, I was super passionate about it. I was getting into tons of fights with my wife because all I wanted to do was fishing. And I had tunnel vision at the time. So the story behind why I was able to fish so much during those early years was I was working a full-time job. I was selling paint at Sherwin-Williams. Due to some personal situations at home, we were having some issues with one of my sons at home. We made the decision for me to quit that job. And so I put in my 2 weeks notice in my President's Award suite. They offered me a promotion to become a sales rep, and I made the phone call to the person offering me the job, and I said, hey, I'm so sorry, I'm declining the opportunity to be a sales rep, and I'm also putting in my 2 weeks notice. And I became a stay-at-home dad because we needed help at home. And so it was a lot of chaos going on at the time, but what I was doing was I was dropping my kids off at school, and I was going straight to the sand. So I was probably fishing 3 to 5 times a week, and I would fish, like just screw up and do whatever the heck, just walking as much sand as possible for about 4 hours, and then look at the clock and like, I can make a couple more casts in time to pick up the kids.
One more cast, nothing wrong is gonna happen, right? Just one more cast.
I may have been late a couple times to pick up my kids, maybe, that was kind of, like what led me to be able to really fish as much as I could. And really just going back to the therapy part of it is I think that as fishermen, this is a niche sport, and those who love this game love it. And those who don't love it have no idea what the heck we're talking about and why we care so much, But for us, I believe that whether it's when our toes hit the sand for the very first time or our feet get onto that sport boat leaving for that 1.5-day trip, the moment that happens, something changes in our brain and we get that little bit of escape and we get to clear our minds. So to me, like fishing has been like absolutely one of the most therapeutic, healthy things, And obviously in any kind of industry and anything that we do, any hobby, anything we're passionate about, there is some toxicity mixed into that too, in the background. And so that's why but I fight for that positivity, And so I can't even remember your question, but maybe I answered some of it.
Well, I want to segue because, when I never got into surf fishing before until, quite honestly, until I started working for CCA, because I was able to have a little bit more flexibility with my time. And for those of you that don't know, Benji has an amazing resource, an amazing tool. You have to check out his social media platforms, especially his YouTube platforms. I can't imagine going through trying to learn things on the fly without going to you as a resource, but truly amazing resource. But let's talk about, as a beginner, what are some of the things that you would highly encourage beginners to look at, to how do you approach it as a beginner, very, very basic stages.
Yeah, I'll answer that. And I also remember the question that you led was, so as I was fishing hard, and then I had the thought, which eventually got me starting my YouTube channel, which you referenced, was, dude, what if I could actually start a YouTube and do it well? And what if I could actually make a living out of this? And what if I don't have to go back to a 9 to 5? So that was the idea that got planted in my head that really got me started in starting my channel and that journey was like passionately doing whatever I could to not have to go back to a 9-to-5 job. And so that's been like the past 5 years, is trying to build this platform and be able to keep doing it. You know, I don't think that I'll ever be rich, but you know, that's never been a passion of mine. It's just been able to do what I can and help pay the bills, you know? Yeah. And then now I forgot the current question.
Let's do this. How do you approach surf fishing as a beginner?
If you want to just start out, I think just getting basic gear doesn't have to be expensive, and then just have an open mind. I think definitely in the age of social media, it's very easy to talk about fishing, talk about catching fish, talk about learning how to identify structure, watching stupid videos like mine, and thinking that you're actually like getting better as a fisherman. Again, referencing Mr. Toji, again, it's one of the things that he loves to say, I think, is nothing beats time on the water. And I think that, you know, Randy and other people, other OGs who helped teach me the game, that was something that I heard several times, and I 100% took it to heart. I said, okay, you know, being new to the fishing world and the industry, you know, one of the first questions that newcomers ask is, where did you catch that, right? And where do I fish? What beach is best?
They want the answer.
They want the answers. It's an honest question. You know, I don't think that a newcomer asks that trying to like break secrets or be selfish. It's an honest question. Where do I fish? And the answer to that is nothing beats time on the water. So I would say if you really, really want to get into it and you really, really want to get better at the game, be willing to explore, be willing to fail, go to your closest beach, start walking it. I think like my YouTube channel and other helpful resources on social media and all that stuff, it's absolutely helpful because it can kind of give you some reference, right? But nothing can be a better teacher than your own experience. And so I found that to be true, and I think like I'm an extremely average fisherman at best. There's nothing special about my game. But I think that the one thing that no one will ever be able to take away from me is the time that I put on the sand. I invested that time, and I think I've literally walked, if we were just to reference, just for example, San Diego from like Silver Strand, like South San Diego, all the way up through maybe even El Segundo. I would say that I've walked almost every piece of sand that's legal to fish up that stretch at one point or another, just exploring, just messing around, whether it's me trying to find those stinking corbina in the skinny water or trying to find halibut structure, right? And so I learned very early on, because I was once a newcomer, so I would put in the forums, hey, can anyone suggest some good beaches to fish in San Diego? And one thing that I noticed whenever I'd ask location kind of questions in any of these forums is very, very, very muted responses at best to nothing. And so, you know, some people get mad at that, like, oh, why aren't people helping? I took that, I think maybe I have a little bit of social sense, like I took that silence as like, oh, this is not really a question you ask. So then I took the other advice, which is nothing beats time on the water, and I said, I'll go find the fish myself, you know? And it wasn't overnight, it was a process of years, but that's what I love about fishing, man. I love the process. I think like, yeah, like, you know, it's a culmination and a reward when you see a big halibut, you know, when you land a big halibut and it comes in, or you know, you get lucky and a sea bass comes in. Yeah, that's a culmination of all the time, but I love the process, man. Like, I just love, like, even if it's a skunk session, I just love being out there. So that's for me, yeah.
So speaking of process, I feel like we can't talk about fishing the surf without talking about moon phases. And you know, the location of where the earth is, where the moon is, where the sun is, how that affects the tides, how it affects pressure, right, on the water.
Yes.
I think we can't talk about it without talking about moon phases. So in your opinion, you know, because when I think about moon phases right now, we were just talking about it before we went up here, talking about white sea bass and how right now we're getting a lot of white sea bass. There's a lot of squid up there right now. But then we look at what is going on offshore with our offshore pelagics, and you look at the bluefin, and they don't want to open their mouths right now. We got to wait a couple days. So it's always interesting knowing that every species of fish, whether they're offshore, inshore, rockfish sometimes, halibut, lingcod a lot of those times. You know, they're so keyed in and sometimes dependent on what the moon is doing. So what are some of the trends, some of the patterns that you've noticed fishing the surf?
Yeah, so regarding moon phases, to be very upfront, currently I don't put as much stock into it. I've been all over the spectrum. It matters. I can't tell you that I've had a scientific conclusion to how it works in the surf, because I've had amazing days when the moon phase doesn't seem to match up. You know, it matters though, because obviously when there's a full moon, the tide swings are going to be a lot more drastic. So the way that it still matters to me is, you know, I like fishing negative tides. When I'm hunting halibut, I like that negative tide structure. So obviously when there's a full moon, there's going to be those bigger swings, and there's going to be those better opportunities to fish some of those negative tide locations. Also, like along with the moon phases, the way it's relevant in the surf is the grunion runs, which started a couple weeks ago. And so, you know, along with those moon phases, you know, the grunion come in, and I will say for that one, I can be pretty confident that when the grunion come in and there's a grunion run, for sure, like predators come in to eat. You know, so I think there's just more opportunity. So again, like I'm not a marine biologist or a scientist, and I feel like a lot of fishermen like to say things scientifically when they might not have the scientific data in front of them. So I'm not going to pretend to be a scientist with that. But based on my anecdotal evidence, those are the things that matter most to me.
Yeah, I mean, and especially if you're out there almost every day. Yeah. I mean, you have an opinion. It's a very educated opinion, right? You know what I mean? But you know, I've always been curious as far as what am I gonna fish with? You know, what are some of the differences and approaches between using live bait like your sand crabs, maybe your ghost shrimp, and a plastic or some kind of topwater stick bait?
Yeah, if you're just starting out, and that's one thing that I struggle with my channel actually, and I don't know if I've ever said this out loud. I love fishing the Lucky Craft, and I love hunting halibut. I love being able to run into a striper or a white sea bass, you know, the game fish. That's really captured my heart and attention after years of doing the other stuff. I would say that if you're just starting out and you're a beginner, just start off with the Carolina rig. You know, like a medium power rod, you know, 10-pound test. Put on a Carolina rig, gulp camo worms, sand crabs if it's in season, maybe get some lugworms at the tackle shop or something like that. But gulp camo worms, they work. That scent definitely gets you bit for sure. 2.5-inch grubs, and just go out there and cast this Carolina rig, look for structure, catch a bunch of perch, you know, corbina and the croaker that are around. That's the best way to kind of get your feet under you. I wouldn't say that halibut is so advanced and so difficult, but I think that it does help to have fishing experience. So if you're coming with zero fishing experience, maybe get acclimated with the Carolina rig, just in terms of, you know, casting, handling your gear and all that kind of stuff, and go from there. It's I think in my opinion, a lot more forgiving. I throw the Lucky Craft nowadays like 90% of the time, unless I'm chasing corbina. So for me, like if you don't know what the conditions are gonna be like, and you just go out there and the conditions are rough, it's gonna be hard to throw your jerkbait. Just because like the swells and the water movement's gonna be difficult for you to control the lure, it's gonna be just challenging to even have a chance. So nowadays, I've kind of learned like when it's gonna be calmer and stuff like that. And so I'm a lot more picky about when I do go out now. And so when I do go out, it's just all about like narrowing that window, right? Like 6-7 years ago, I'd go out and I'd fish 8 hours, you know, literally like 6-7 hours if I had it. I'd just stay out there for as long as possible. Nowadays, my fishing sessions, I plan to be like 3 hours, you know, sometimes 2 hours, and just get my stuff done and then I'll be out of there. So it's just about narrowing that window.
So walk me through, you know, when you first come up on a spot, you know, say you're looking at surf conditions or weather conditions, and you think, oh, it's going to be really nice today. You go back out and your heart sinks and you see whitecaps and it's really windy. You know, what is your approach to reading the surf? Are you looking for those troughs during those negative tides? Are you looking for rips in the current? You know, just walk us through what What is your initial prognosis when you get out there to kind of plan your day?
So I try to avoid rough days, but I would like to say that fishing horrible conditions is not a bad thing, because it kind of teaches you what you want to avoid. And, you know, it can help you kind of learn how to fish rougher conditions too, just by being out there and dealing with it. It's very challenging. With the Carolina rig, if you see the whitecaps in the water and stuff, it's gonna be hard. Even if you have, you know, an 1.5 ounce sinker in SoCal, like you're still gonna get knocked around. You know, it's gonna be very, very difficult. But I still think that it's good experience to go out there and fish rough conditions, because it just kind of teaches you how to contrast what good conditions look like. If I'm going out in good conditions, yeah, just front troughs in Southern California. And I'm gonna keep mentioning Randy because I'm so happy he's here. Sorry, Randy. One thing that like guys like Randy will like to do is, you know, like in Huntington Beach, for example, lots of stretches of Huntington Beach have a front trough, literally that you can walk up to, and it's like right there, a shallow running trough. You can have 20 fish sessions out of that little front trough. You can throw a little 1/4 ounce egg sinker on a Carolina rig with sand crabs or your Gulf camel worms or your little grubs and have 20 to 30 fish sessions casting with a little underhand flip right in front of you. You know, and so yeah, I'm looking for that if I'm throwing a Carolina rig, just doing your basic surf fishing. And for halibut too, you know, like those front troughs. Every beach is fairly similar with that front trough, and then there'll be a sandbar, and then there'll be the outer break. I feel like one thing, if you're brand new, that might be a mistake is thinking that you have to cast as far as possible to catch fish. A lot of times the fish that you can catch in our SoCal surf specifically is right in front of you. You don't need to necessarily bomb it out there 100 yards to catch the fish you're looking for. And sometimes the better grade fish are right in front of you too. And you wouldn't even know it, you know, so.
Wow, so that's so wild to me, right? It's so wild. But you know what, when you're fishing, say, more structure, right, versus more slopey, sandbar, very sandy environments, you know, what are the differences in your approach between the two?
Yeah, it's very different. So that's typically when I'm hunting halibut. So literally halibut, I don't know a beach that doesn't have halibut. Like, I don't know if, like, I'm not just saying that. Every single beach, if any of you guys know a beach that doesn't have halibut, let me know. But I've either caught or known of halibut being caught on every single beach. However, if you're really into the halibut game, finding reefs and hard structure next to next to like sand, like flat sand, is very, very advantageous. So if you find a reef or a tide pool, I would sink a lot of time into that kind of structure. You can locate that kind of structure either A, by randomly running into it as you put time on the water, or you can go on Google Maps and you can use the satellite function and you can just scroll the coastline and you'll see the reef on a lot of those images. You identify that, head out to that beach at a low tide. So there's a particular stretch of sand that is very dear to my heart, which I will not specify, that when I first started fishing it, well, so first off, it took me a year to dial in that beach before I actually started consistently catching, which kind of shows you my level of expertise at the time. It took literally a year of me like skunking and losing lucky crafts, but I was always fishing at a high tide. Why? Because the general rule of thumb is the best times to surf fish is at high tide, an hour before high tide, an hour after high tide. So I was doing that and just not catching fish, but the beach looked so good. I didn't even know there was a reef there until one time I fished it at a lower tide. Not a low tide, but a lower tide. And as I was walking past the stretch where I had sawed off like 17 drop shot rigs and probably 14 lucky crafts over the span of months, that day I walked past and there was a little boiler rock sticking out like 30 yards out. And I was like, ooh, there's a boiler there. So then I came back another time next week at a lower tide. And then I saw more. There was like rocks sticking out of the water. I was like, ooh. And so I started fishing that, and then I started catching halibut. I'm like, oh my gosh. So then I just went all in. I came back when it was like a -1, and I walked to that stretch, and I mean, I didn't, but I probably could have seen all my rigs stuck in that reef. There was just heavy reef and rocks everywhere. And I'm like, that's where I was casting into? Like, I had no idea. So then through the process of elimination, I keep coming to that reef over and over and over again, trying to learn how to fish it. And then what I do is I would come to that beach at a negative tide, and I can actually walk to the edge of that reef, all the way to the end of it, and I can walk out. And then a lot of times with these reefs, it ledges out, and it'll drop off, and then there'll be little bowls, because as the surf comes in, it carves out structure in front of the reef. So I would literally be going out there in my waders, slippery rocks and everything, trying to find a steady place to stand on, and I'd cast out into that structure, and then it was game over. It was like, I love that style of fishing. It feels a little dangerous. Sometimes it can get a little sketchy, and then the caliber of fish that you can pull on in those kind of situations, it can get insane. And so that's what I love doing. Well, sight fishing Corvina still might be number one, but reef hopping and fishing at the edges of reefs is either first or a very close second. I really enjoy doing that. So if you want to get into game fish like white sea bass and halibut, that's the kind of structure that you want to find. Again, if you haven't seen any structure like that, go on Google Maps, spend about 5 minutes scanning the coastline, and you'll find reefs up and down the coast. Earmark a couple of them that look interesting to you, then start experimenting and putting in the time. And that to me is the most rewarding thing, when you actually get out there and put in some time, lose a couple of lures, and then pull on that 25, 30-inch halibut or catch your first legal white sea bass out of that kind of structure. It's the most rewarding feeling. And that to me is what I love most about the game.
Are there any questions from the audience? Any burning? I see a hand back there. Is that Matt? I think I see Matt.
So, okay, I'm a bass nerd, but I spent a lot of time early on as I was figuring stuff out for myself in the surf. Kind of things have changed a lot from like 15 years ago. What's like your optimal hard bait setup? And as far as hard baits go, obviously the Lucky Craft Flash Minnow 110 is like halibut Minnow 1. What are some other options though as far as different hard baits, jerk baits, or other baits? This is a very loaded question, but I'm just intrigued and interested.
Yeah, you put me in a hard spot, Matt, because I do have a relationship with Lucky Craft. You know, this is my opinion. Obviously, the Flash Minnow 110 is kind of the OG, and I think when the halibut game was really getting popular, shout out to the OGs that were really getting into it like 15 years ago in the very beginning. The Flash Minnow 110 was the lure, the hard bait that kind of started it off, you know, in terms of hunting halibut. My opinion of halibut is that they're dumb. I think that they'll eat anything that's wobbling in front of their face. You just got to get it in front of their face. I like the 110 because it's the suspending 1 to 2 foot diver, and I'm fishing negative tides. So it fits my style perfectly. I'm fishing that 3 foot water column. And again, there's reefs and rocks sticking up over there. So I'm not necessarily digging it through those rocks. I'm kind of swimming it right above. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think with the hard baits, there's a lot of different options. I don't fish soft plastics that much, but arguably, maybe not even arguably, it might be even a more effective option if you're throwing a weedless Texas rig or a weighted swim bait hook with like a 4 to 5 inch swim bait. That's an absolutely amazing way to fish, and also it's weedless, so you know it's going to be a little bit more forgiving. You're still going to snag, and it's still not going to be foolproof, but I know a lot of guys that do extremely well with the soft plastic option.
I mean, do you have a preference over, say, a fluke or maybe like a rib Kitech? Or just it all depends on application and what you're targeting? Yeah,
if you're drop shotting, I think a fluke is better, you know, and then if you're throwing like a Texas rig, you know, like a weedless swim bait, a paddle tail is probably better. Kitechs are great action, but they rip really easily. My friend Josh from Big Lout Baits, he pours like a Kitech similar thing that's a little firmer. Tons of options out there though, so yeah. So I mean, with my halibut journey, I probably caught my first 200 halibut on the drop shot. Before I even gave the Lucky Craft a chance, because I'm like, that's a $20 lure. But I eventually came around to that. So a lot of different ways.
Oh, we got one over here, Chris.
What's your rod technique as far as using the 1 ton black minnow and or your drop shot with a fluke as far as rod action goes?
Yeah.
Are you varying it? What are you doing? What's your technique?
This is the rod I've been using for, I think, a year and a half now. This is the Okuma Rockaway SP. It's a 10-foot rod, and I have this paired up right now with the Okuma X series. With the Lucky Craft, right after the cast, I'm reeling in the slack line as fast as I can, pulling my line tight. I'll give a quick one or two upward rod twitches to get that thing swimming, to make sure that I have the action on it. I'm casting, I try to time my cast over an incoming swell. So again, those days when you're going out there, I'm looking for long intervals. So I'm looking for 15 to 18, maybe 20-second wave intervals. Those are my optimal times to go because I just have more time in between swell. Cast over the swell, reel in the slack line, and then as slow as you possibly can. This thing, as long as your line's not bowed out, if your line's straight, that thing's wobbling. You don't necessarily have to feel the wobble. Cadence is very important in terms of getting bit with the Lucky Craft. And I think as a beginner, that's probably what I had to work through, was because I thought I was going slow, but you can go a lot slower. So cadence, you can do a straight retrieve. Just with the right cadence, it'll get bit. What I like to do, because I'm fishing negative tides and a lot of hard structure, I'm reeling and then I'm twitching once. It's classic jerkbait style. I think with the freshwater world, when you're jerkbait fishing, you're whipping down, right? Because you're down. For me, I actually make my rod twitches up because I'm trying to hop it off the rocks. So I go twitch, twitch, and I'm constantly retrieving, but after a rod twitch, I'm just reeling in the slack line. So effectively, my Lucky Craft is slash, slash, and while I'm reeling up the slack line, it's paused, and it's suspending in the water. So I'm twitch, 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 and I'm just trying to go as slow as possible. So that's my preferred style, is I'm always working that, partially because I want that thing to be knifing in the water, but also it's kind of an insecurity complex for me because it keeps me in tune with my lure. So I know that it's there because I'm trying to go as slow as I can. I want to feel that thing, I want to feel the weight of the Lucky Craft pulling back on me when I'm rod twitching. So that's another reason why I do it. I'm not sure if that's the wisest way to do it, but that's what's worked for me. And then you can also straight retrieve, and if you're straight retrieving, you can straight retrieve and then just pause. Retrieve, do like 5 cranks, and then just stop. And just stop that thing. And I think one thing Matt's dad taught me when I was fishing Clementi with Captain Florentino, I was throwing the Lucky Craft, and what he was teaching me about getting those calicos to bite was burn and then pause. And that pause, it was for 3 to 5 seconds. I was so surprised at how long he was recommending that I pause. I was burning and then just letting it sit, and I caught calicos that would smash it 3 seconds into my pause. So I think there's something to be said for the pause, but when it comes to getting bit with the Lucky Craft or any hard bait from the surf, cadence is really important. And that's just practice, I would say.
Benji, we've got one last question
First of all, I love your story, Benji, and I just started surf fishing a few weeks ago, and thankfully for your videos, it cut a lot of the guesswork out. So I did catch a 29-inch halibut last week, thanks to you.
Yeah, congrats.
I appreciate that. Totally left, but I'll take it. I'll say it was partially your catch too.
I take 0 credit, brother.
But my question was, the bigger Lucky Craft, is it the 130 or something? What would you throw? What situation would you throw that in as opposed to the 110?
Yeah, the Lucky Craft just came out with the 130 MRS. That's a sinking lure. It only has 2 trebles on it, and it's 25 grams, so about 1 ounce. So it's a little bit heavier, and I love that. I'm so comfortable with the 110 and how it swims that I'm still adjusting to the 130. But because it's sinking, you can fish deeper water columns. And so if you're just fishing long troughs, open sand, might be the better option to get lower in the water column. I still fish it at negative tides though, and I still fish it in lower water columns. I'll work it a little faster, and I'll just make sure that I'm not digging it into the rocks. But it's the exact same thing. And I think that lure's been out for about 5 months now, and I've caught a lot of fish on it. And I work it very similarly to the 110. So, but again, the benefit of it, because it's a little bit bigger and a little heavier, absolutely, if you have a little bit of wind in your face, one of the weaknesses of the 110 is if you got even a slight wind in your face, that lure gets knocked down on the cast. the 130 can cut through it a little better. Thanks so much for having me, guys. What a blessing, and hopefully we can just get out there and keep having fun.